Hello everyone, welcome back to SMITE. This is going to be a bit of a different video because there's a lot to talk about, not about areas of the game, but just the past couple of weeks. I've been away on a family trip for the past week and a half, which is why my upload schedule has been really wacky. It's because I tried to pre-record as much as possible before I left on my trip. Let me see, all of last week and from the Thursday previous to that. I wish I had a calendar right now. But roughly speaking, a week and a half. And the first half of 2 weeks ago, I was trying to record and upload videos. I'll get to that in a bit, but that's why my upload schedule has been interesting. Is because I failed to record enough good footage, and even then, looking back on it, as Tuzi mentioned, I had my Cthulhu episode was not exactly a stunning, not exactly a stunning piece of work, since that was pre-recorded before leaving. My actual gameplay in that video was okay. It still accomplishes the point I wanted it to accomplish, which was talking about Cthulhu as being more supporty than a lot of people give him credit for. But yeah, don't pay attention to my rotations, because those are terrible in that video. Absolutely fair criticism from Tuzi. Absolutely terrible rotations. Not using pre-recording as an excuse or anything. I absolutely am and can be better than that. But that also brings me back to kind of something I want to talk about is I am not the best Smite player, and I never will be. And you might be concerned or, oh, why are you making videos? Why I make videos is because there really isn't a best Smite player. Take any pro. They might be one of the best in their specific role. Alright? But they're the best in their specific role given certain conditions, given teammates they're comfortable with, given they're using a god they're comfortable with, a god they're familiar with. They're the best in maybe specific points of the game, even. Even a pro isn't going to be the best at any one thing. Everyone has, and I'm not saying this sarcastically or anything like that, everyone has strengths and weaknesses as a player. There is no perfect player. As Tuzi pointed out, my rotations are fairly weak. This is absolutely true. This is something I've been, and I mentioned this in my response to Tuzi. My rotations throughout my career have been consistently weak because I started way back in the day before supports rotated as early as they do now. We used to rotate only after, like, team fights started. Like, the idea way back in the day was the solo lane would get really beefy and start rotating early. Nowadays, the solo lane stays in lane as long as they can until they can no longer afford to do so. That's a conversation for a different time. But why I started to record the various guides to Smite, and why I have the comprehensive guide, and I actually want to talk about the point of the comprehensive guides, since I haven't talked about that since starting the series, or the 5 series, technically, is there is not really currently a lot out there available for new players to learn Smite, I've noticed. Unfortunately, a lot of the... well, I'll get to that in a second. A lot of the social spaces online for Smite aren't really beginner-friendly, which tends to be a problem I've noticed with MOBAs in general. League of Legends, well, Blizzard took some steps to correct this with League of Legends, but that tends to still be fairly sporadic in terms of how effective that was in general. And that's just, generally speaking, going to be an issue with MOBAs. It is a highly competitive genre, and as a result, and this is something I'm also going to get back to, as a result, there are a lot of people who generally frown on questions or dissenting opinions, etc. Speaking to that, I don't know where this comment chain went, because this... somebody commented on my Ares video, and I cannot find this comment anymore. I'm not sure why. I don't know if it's an error in this system. I don't know if YouTube deleted it. I did not delete this because I had a response to this very specifically. But on my Ares video, somebody commented that it was a terrible guide. They played ranked Ares all the time, and they were, you know, whatever. They called me a diamond, whatever, or no, they didn't call me a diamond. They called me like a bronze or whatever. The comprehensive guides are not intended to cover ranked. There are a couple of reasons for this. First off, ranked has a very specific meta that changes on average. Just use this as a general rule of thumb. It changes on average 3-ish times a year, or 3-ish times a season, I think would be a better descriptor. As new gods come out, as adjustments are made to the meta, bigger adjustments. I'll talk about the update pretty soon. We really should be grabbing jungle camps, not pressing their tower. But anyways, back to the point. The ranked meta tends to change season by season. And while I don't have any problem necessarily covering that, the point of the comprehensive guides is to prepare you, the viewer slash listener, however you prefer to consume this media. It is to prepare you for this role, whatever this happens to be. I'm not going to put this episode in any specific comprehensive guide episode. I happen to be playing Ares because it's kind of where this video was sourced from, was that comment chain that I can't find anymore for some bizarre reason. And if you are the original commenter who criticized the video, I did not delete your comment. It is a valid piece of criticism. I don't cover ranked. And I do that intentionally because I don't think ranked is, at least for me, quite as expansive as casual is. Casual, you can see all kinds of really weird things, and I think covering casuals gives you more varied and better experiences as a support player, or as any player, really, than ranked will. Ranked is, you're basically, if you're not picking one of, I would say, for each role, approximately 5 top-tier gods, you're going to be looked askance, you're going to be accused of game throwing, etc., and unless you prove your chops in that ranked game, you're going to be blamed for it. There's all kinds of issues with ranked that cause me to not enjoy it. I play Smite because I genuinely love the game. I'm not fond of the ranked mindset, but I also don't blame them. I'm not here to say, oh, they're terrible, or oh, that they shouldn't be that way. I understand. I used to play ranked. I was diamond or platinum years ago, and then one time a bunch of years ago, and then the second year I was going to go, you know, really hard into ranked. I stopped when I was at like gold or something because I just wasn't enjoying it, so I walked away from ranked. But I did reach, I want to say platinum, but I can't quite remember off the top of my head. It's in my records somewhere. You can check it if you like. I really don't care. There's sites that track that. But I was, a long time ago, a diamond or platinum player. And it's not how I enjoy the game. I will cover ranked eventually when I have, I don't know, more time. I'm not sure when I will. I do intend to at some point in the future. I have to get back into it first and then come to grips with the meta of that, obviously, because, again, that is very specific. There are specific builds or specific ways you play ranked. I just find it less interesting than casual because you see fewer cool things going on. There are less wild picks. I did an episode by request of Bacchus. That would never have flown in ranked. That I would have been at least criticized, maybe politely, but probably not. And that's fair enough. Jungle Bacchus is not as effective as most assassins are on the role, typically speaking. Again, it depends on your personal experiences. But this also comes back to what I was saying earlier about there being no perfect player. There are players out there, there are people out there who absolutely play Jungle Bacchus all the time and do better than a lot of people who play assassins in the jungle lane. That's just how that goes. And that's fine. I've long stood by the statement, there is no wrong way to play Smite. I will amend that statement here. There is a wrong way to play ranked. I will give you that addendum. But I also want to approach something else Tuzi said very specifically. Tuzi criticized 2 things in my Cthulhu video, one of which very legitimate and very fair. It's a problem I've had consistently throughout my Smite player career is rotations. Sometimes I try to pre-rotate. Sometimes I'm taking a guess on what I think the enemy's going to do and try to get there first. Sometimes this works and it's a 400 IQ play. Sometimes it fails abysmally and it's 0 IQ. It really depends. Sometimes I just rotate for no damn reason. I'll be really honest. Sometimes I just don't have a reason. I just rotate because it seems like the right thing to do at the time, and I'm just confused. But no matter how you approach that, at the end of the day, we're still talking... there we go. We'll just do this then, since I whiffed that chain completely. That doesn't change the fact that at the end of the day, you know, I still have this very definite rotation problem, but there was another criticism that I disagree with Tuzi on, and I'll tell you very specifically why. Tuzi very specifically criticized my ward placement, and to some extent that is fair. I have developed the unfortunate habit of automatically placing wards down in specific places, and that is... part of that criticism is fair. I will freely concede I habitually place wards in the same places. You've seen where I've accidentally warded over somebody else, some other ally's ward. However, they are very locked into specific warding locations, and I want to warn against that, because as a support, yes, it's important that you ward specific places, but you also have to ward where your team isn't. To some and that's, again, something else that... is very different in casuals as compared to ranked. In ranked, everyone wards very specific places. It is your job to ward those places. That's fine. Ranked has pseudo-warding rules, I guess you could say. But in casuals, people just kind of ward if they think of it. For a long time, I would consistently forget to ward. I forced myself to develop the habit to ward. Sometimes I still forget, obviously. You've seen that in episodes. But my approach to warding has always been try to ward where you expect traffic to be, at least in casuals, because your allies aren't necessarily going to ward where you think they should or where you would typically expect them to, which is, again, fine. But you as a support do have to cover those areas, which is why I typically tend to ward intersections, because those are the places of high traffic, and you can see where Olerin hasn't really warded much at all in this game. Uller has warded. You can see where Uller has warded. Atlas is not warded diddly squat, and I'm not sure Susano has. If he... yeah, Susano has. I can see where he's placed a ward or two, I believe. Or I remember seeing a ward or two of his. So, yeah, the Uller and the Susano are warding. Atlas and Olerin are not. So what I'm going to have to do then, as a support, I'm adapting to this, and I'm seeing, alright, these two aren't warding. This means I will very likely have to ward in places that I would normally expect or want them to ward, which would be their entry intersections. As an example, to pull an example from this specific game, so while there are places you really should be focusing on as a support warding, I agree on that. Don't use that as a hard and fast rule. You have to adapt to what your team is or is not warding in terms of warding. There are... I would say there aren't warding rules in casual so much as warding guidelines, to steal a Pirates of the Caribbean quote there. Because it really does depend on the match, your allies, their warding comfort, their competency at warding, things like that. You have to adapt to that. You can't just ward the same place every time and expect results. You have to pick up the slack here as a support, or even in any role, really, and ward where it matters. So I'll half agree with Tuzi here. Yes, my warding could be less habitual. I do have a tendency to fall back and ward the same places continuously, and that is definitely something I need to break as a habit. But I will also simultaneously disagree that there are places you should always be warding as a support or as any specific role. You should always approach warding with, okay, this is where I'm seeing traffic come in, I need to ward this. Right? For most roles, this is going to be usually covering your lane. For mid, that gets fairly sketchy because you have to kind of see whether or not your jungler or a support are warding, because they should be theoretically warding more towards mid, theoretically. I'm going to have to expand my wards outwards in this game a little bit because, again, my solo and my ADC are not warding that I have seen so far. So I will, as a support, have to pick up that slack and ward a little bit farther out than I would typically prefer. I'm actually going to be talking about that later on in the episode, I think. But that is, something I wanted to talk about in specific regards to warding, because I don't think I talk about warding enough. It is a self-criticism of my episodes that I typically see. I don't really extensively talk about warding when I really think I should. Just as a general rule. Okay, so they took care of him. That's good. Or Uller took care of him. That was well timed for my complete miss. But yes, let me see. I've touched upon why I don't cover ranked, which is fine. Also, I want to also specify that the comprehensive guides, again, I cover casuals specifically for the very express purpose of, again, casuals give you a bit more, a much more diverse experience. So I prefer them for that reason, and I think a lot of people should definitely be practicing in that to prepare them for literally everything. I also want to point out that the comprehensive guides aren't to sit down and be like, oh, you should always play this god this way. That is not the intention of these. I am showing... My Ares episode, for instance, that was one way to play Ares, and the intention is not to say, oh, you should always play Ares this way. This is one way I have played Ares, and you can use this as a sort of launching point. I don't want you to take these comprehensive guides as like the holy gospel of smiting. I want you to use these and learn from them and propel yourself into a build you're comfortable with. Maybe you play, and I talked about this in the Ares episode, maybe you prefer a much more aggressive style. I'm going to be building a little aggressive here because we are grossly ahead, and I can get away with it. So I'm going to be building very aggressive here. But maybe you don't like to play that way. Maybe even when you're this far ahead, you like playing defensively. You like being the full tank support. There is nothing wrong with that. You can absolutely build and play Ares that way. And that is a completely legitimate way to play Ares. You can play Ares hyper-aggressive, more aggressively than I do. Also fine. I want you to use my... And that's why I use... I guess the episode will be a little shorter than I was anticipating. But anyways, I called these guides, not like builds or anything like that, because they're not intended to be the be-all, end-all of either these, these gods or anything. And that's also why I do multiple episodes of certain people quite often, is because my point isn't to get you to play one god one specific way. My point here is to talk about ways you can play them. This is why I love requests, because people will think of or try things or find things that I've never thought of because of the way I am. I just don't think in that direction, and they do, and try them out, and then they ask me to cover that, and maybe I've played it before, maybe I've not. The Bacchus Jungle was a great example. I'd played that, I think, once or twice before that request had been put in. And I certainly hadn't played it in the past 2 years. That was a long time ago that I'd experimented around in a moment of insanity with Jungle Bacchus. That was a very experimental year of Smite for me. Anyways, back to the point. I certainly hadn't played him recently like that, and I sat down and I took longer than I was originally anticipating. I took I want to say 4 days, just taking Bacchus into the jungle and hashing out a whole bunch of builds and finding two that I liked, and I wound up talking about both of them eventually. I don't know if I ever actually remember to delete the old Bacchus video. I might leave that up. Regardless, I found two different ways I was comfortable building Bacchus in the jungle and how I approached playing him personally. Please don't take that Bacchus jungle guide as, oh, this is how you must play Bacchus. Use that as, oh, this is what I found worked with Bacchus in the jungle role, and if you're going to start playing Bacchus in the jungle, give this a try, see how you like it, see how you play compared to me. Maybe you're more aggressive, maybe you're more defensive. It depends on your personal playstyle. And that's what I want you to get out of these guides. I'm not trying to pass these off as, like I said, the final word of any of these. That's not my intention. My intention is for you to watch these, maybe try what I build, maybe make your own adjustments, maybe I inspire you to try something new, and you find something that really works for you that wouldn't work for a lot of other people because that's just how you play, or that's just how your mind works, or whatever. In an episode covering an update, a mid-season update a while ago, with the earrings, which I do need to talk about, I mentioned that the next generation of Smite players are going to be better than my generation. That's 100% true. I stand by that, and I will die on that hill. If you're listening or watching this episode, and you started playing Smite this year, or you've come back to Smite after a long hiatus, and you've forgotten most of your Smite, I have several people who've commented, thank you for these. I've come back to Smite recently, and these really help. Thank you for the support. Thank you for enjoying the guides and finding them useful. That's what they're here for, and I appreciate that feedback. But if you're new or returning after a long hiatus, you're very likely going to surpass me 7 years from now. Sure, I might have, a sum total more knowledge, sure. But in terms of skill, you're going to be better than me because you're going to be more adaptive than I am. I'm going to actually talk very specifically about the item that I alluded to really quick. Just to pull Camazotz out here really quick. There it is. Nope, I need to pull out apparently very specifically. I forgot about this. A hunter. Give me that hunter. Basic attack projectile speed increased by 40%. I'm an old hand. I could adjust to this in time if I played with the Griffin Wing earrings enough. Okay? I could. Eventually. But you, watching or listening right now, if you came back to this game after a long hiatus, or you're new this year, you will adapt to this so much faster than I will, in far fewer games, and be better with it as a result, because you will be able to adapt to that faster. I've spent years with basic attack projectiles, all traveling at the same approximate speed. This would throw my aim off. If you are new, or, again, returning, this isn't going to throw your aim off as much, if at all. Because you haven't spent the years playing with the same projectile speed. Alright, there are pros and cons of being an old hand at Smite. And this is one of the cons. I'm not going to be able to as fully adapt to things like this as you will if you're new. I will get around to covering this now that it's not trash. Now that they've adjusted this to actually be a legitimate, useful item, and amen to that, I intend to practice with this. I was practicing with a couple of other things earlier yesterday. Again, I had a week and a half hiatus. I needed to get back, shake off the rust. That's why I didn't upload any episode yesterday. I was shaking off my Smite rust. I was experimenting with some new things. I was familiarizing myself with Ishtar, who's really interesting, and I want to talk about her and that the trend of new gods. But we can save that for a different episode. But I will actually, now that these are really effective, except for the nerf to Sphinx's bauble, which I want to talk about, but I will cover these now soon, not right away. I still want to experiment with them and in what situations I find them useful, and what gods I find them useful on, and in what context I find them useful. I want to do some experimentation with these before I really get into the weeds with these, but I will do so now because they're all mostly across the board actually potentially useful items now, whereas before the nerfs that they offered were, I think, a little too damaging, which is what they alluded to. And this is actually the part of the update with Ishtar, besides Ishtar herself. This is the significantly interesting part of the update for me, was the change to the earrings to generally make them more useful overall. And I want to talk about that in another episode. That'll probably be tomorrow's episode as I continue to test things out. I don't want to, jump right back into the comprehensive guides right away, because, again, I gotta finish shaking off my rust of a week and a half, and as you can hear, I'm a little under the weather. I caught a cold on the way back, I think. Plane travel tends to do that to you. It's not too bad, but you've probably been hearing it a little bit on the edge of my voice throughout this video, and I apologize for that. But the point of these guides is to get you to be better than me in the future. That is my hope, that is my dream, that you will surpass me, and then take what you've learned, both from me and from your personal experience, and transfer that to the next generation, who, with any luck, will be better than you. And the game can progress forward in a healthy state with an improving player base, with, ideally a better space for community, which it desperately needs, but we're not going to get into that right now. And overall improve this community. Now, I'm not a social person, so I don't really have anything I can say about the online spaces in which SMITE is discussed. I mostly lurk online. It's a failing of mine. I do need to work on being more, I guess, internet social. I really should. I'll be making efforts in that regard in the future. Not obviously right away. I have to kind of I have to plan that out, work my way into that. But it's something I intend to improve. But for the time being, here we are. I'm making these guides so you get better than me. And I want to, as a final word for this episode, because I've rambled a little bit here and I apologize for that. As a final word, don't lock yourself or your mindset into anything. And don't let other people try and lock you down either. The comment that I've lost about the Ares video, which I wish was up, I really liked my response to that. I don't know if it's still on the episode or if it's just lost to time, because I don't know. YouTube didn't like it. I don't know what happened to that. I've noticed a couple of comments have been doing weird things. But there's one comment I really quickly want to address at the end of this too. Anyways, the guy was saying how that's the totally wrong way to build Ares, and that would never work, and etc., which is untrue. It can work if that's how you play, and that's one of the ways I've played Ares, and it's the way I'm comfortable playing Ares, and that's fine. And if that's not the way this guy plays, sure, absolutely. And I want to address one final thing really quick, specifically in regards to ranked players. I've noticed this. This is coming back, I guess, in vogue. There were a couple of years there where this kind of problem really wasn't a big deal. There were a couple of years where this was a really common thing, but in the SMITE community, there's this weird perception that ranked players are somehow better than casual players. I have often found this to be true with an asterisk, a very big asterisk. Ranked players are better than the average casual player with a handful of very specific gods, all of which are at the top of the meta, none of which are doing anything unexpected. They're predictable, generally speaking. No offense to you if you're a ranked player, but I think you'll find, if you give an honest look at your own gameplay in a casual game compared to a ranked game, that compared to the average casual player, you're probably a lot more predictable, because ranked games tends to follow specific metas year by year that changes approximately 3 times a year, whereas casual players are absolutely insane in both good and bad ways. Another conversation for another time. But casual players are willing to risk a lot more and do a lot more wild things than the average ranked player. And that gives casual mains a level of diversity that consistent ranked players, rank mains, I guess I would describe them as, won't achieve if they don't balance it out. If you really want to be the best, or as the best you can absolutely be, you will take the meta and push it through casual and see how it responds to insanity. Because I think you'll find a lot of ranked players, again, excellent with specific gods, put out of their comfort zone don't do as well. This tends to make them upset. You know, we've all seen it before. You've probably seen a game or two where somebody started flaunting their rank. Oh, I'm platinum. Oh, I'm diamond. I'm whatever. Or they'll, on the other hand, the other way this can go is, oh, you play or talk like a bronze or a silver or whatever. If you see somebody, you know, going off on how high their rank is or how low yours must be, and they do poorly, this is going to sound strange. Don't laugh at them. Recommend more casual. The problem that a lot of ranked players have, and this has kind of become a stereotype with ranked players, is that ranked players, I've seen this in the community before. Oh, you know, if somebody starts bragging about their rank or starting to insult your rank, they're probably bad. It's not actually true. The problem isn't a ranked player's skill. You could take a platinum ranked player of any variety, plant them in a casual game, and how well they do depends on how closely to the meta that game winds up aligning with. You throw something really crazy at them, and that person's good at the crazy. Say you put in a top-tier Jungle Bacchus. No one sees that coming. I don't see that coming, and I've played it. Yeah, they're going to be thrown for a loop, and they're not going to know how to react. And that's fine. I try not to criticize ranked players for doing poorly in casual games because it's more of them simply not being able to adapt to casual. And maybe you disagree with this as a ranked player. Maybe you don't. If you do disagree with me, at least personally, maybe your own personal experience is different. But in my experience, ranked players generally have a hard time adapting to crazier things, which is, and I mentioned this in an earlier video where I mentioned that wild picks, sometimes the advantage of them is more on the surprise factor than the actual effectiveness of that god in that role. Jungle Bacchus, part of his effectiveness is the surprise that people experience when they realize, oh, that's a jungling Bacchus. How do we deal with this? And Jungle Bacchus is a scary thing because he's substantially different in terms of his stats compared to your average jungler. He's a lot tankier. And people don't know how to react to that. Understandably. And so even a lot of casual players would have a hard time with that. And if a ranked player had a hard time with the Jungle Bacchus, I wouldn't blame them. That's pretty wild. Especially if the Jungle Bacchus is good at it. So, to ranked players, don't come after casual players or people of lower rank. That really has nothing to do with their skill level. First off, rank a lot of the times has to do with more with time invested than your actual skill in the first place. No offense. I've been through the system twice. I know at least that much. But casual players, if somebody's coming in and they're really proud of their rank, that's fine. They worked hard for that rank, and you shouldn't really take that away from them. That's not right. But you have to also keep in mind that if they're doing poorly in a casual game, it's not because they're not skilled. They just don't know how to adapt to the increased craziness of casual conquest. I just want you to try to see things from a technical point of view, the other person's shoe. Point of view. I don't know why I said shoe. Um, I would, and this is kind of my attempt, well, my start at actually talking about the community. There are things wrong with this community, obviously. There's things wrong in all communities. That's just the way life goes. But I would like to try to take steps towards that because I love this game. I love this game a lot. It's one of the very few games I'll invest money on just skins for. And that number of games that I will do that for, I can count on one hand. It means a lot to me, this game. It's how I connect with my family. It's usually a jolly good time. It allows me to challenge myself. It allows me to interact with people from around the world in a common hobby, which we all share. I mean, we're all there playing the same game. Why would you get upset at somebody playing it? Sure, not everyone plays great, but also on the other hand, we all have bad days. Even ranked players, even pros, have bad games, bad days. It happens. So as I've kind of gotten older, and I won't say wiser because that's not quite true, but more aware of, I guess, life in the SMITE community, I would say that just because someone's doing bad in a game does not necessarily mean they are bad. It just means they're having a bad game. And like I said, we all have them. Hell, look at that Cthulhu episode. But that was just a bunch of topics I kind of wanted to talk about today as I, in the background shake off the rust and continue to experiment. I have not come nearly to grips with Ishtar. She's a fascinating example of a trend I encourage in SMITE, and I'll talk about that in tomorrow's episode. But in the meantime, thank you all very much for listening to me ramble here. For my recording software says 37 minutes, so I guess it's about approximately correct. I hope that this at least encourages you to think in a new way, and to maybe take a moment and sympathize with people on the opposite side of the SMITE community. I mean, we all love the game, or I hope we all love the game. I sometimes wonder about some of these people playing this game, if they actually love the game or if they're just addicted to it. But we're theoretically all here to enjoy the game. Sure, some of us suck sometimes. Hell, I have bad games. It's why I have a warm-up game before I even record anything. It's why I have to shake off rust after a week and a half away. But at the end of the day, we're all here to have a nice game, and this sure sounds sappy, but I mean, it's a beautiful game. It's really about cultures, because we're talking about, cultural mythologies from various cultures, and I think that's a beautiful thing. And to end the Sapfest, just take a moment to think about the other person, and to not take these episodes necessarily completely literal. Take them as, here's what I find works in these specific contexts, and that's why I record whole matches, because I want you to see the context in which I'm making these decisions, so you can better see where I'm coming from, so you can better understand why I'm making these decisions, except for my rotations in that Cthulhu episode, because heavens to Betsy. But that's the general idea here, and the comprehensive guides aren't to say, oh, you should play this god this way. It is more to say, as a support player, if you are, for some reason, force-fed this particular character, here's what I find works, here's some variations that I find also work well, and here's why I would make those changes. Things like that, and, have a blast, experiment on your own kind of thing. So with that being said, thank you all very much for joining me. If you liked this, please like and subscribe. If you didn't, please ignore me. And if you have any comments, questions, concerns, ideas, suggestions, or requests, please leave them down in the conversation in the comment section below. I do like differing perspectives. I was going to talk about that in this episode, but this has already stretched on long enough. I'll talk about that next episode. But thank you all very much for being here with me and walking this journey of Smite knowledge with me. And if you're new to the game and you watch or listen to this, welcome. It's it's got its rough patches, but it's overall excellent as a game and as a community. I think the community as a whole is generally good. Um, but thank you.